I worked in the games industry myself for more than 20 years. Starting as a game designer, and later I became producer and project leads on more of 60 titles. For example, Desperados, Wanted Dead or Alive, the Guild series, if you played that one, Spellforce, The Order of Dawn. Later, I also joined the browser games industry, worked on titles such as Icaria for Gameforge. I worked together with Christina at Tradian Games. And during that time, especially in the games industry, I was quite frequently, I worked for publishers as well as developers, and especially when you're working for a publisher and you're a producer, you're probably the first person development teams talk to when they have a new idea and they want to pitch this idea, and usually they approach you during a conference such as E3 or Game Developers Conference. And so from a publisher perspective, you always judge a game idea by some very simple rules, and these are some of the rules or some of the measurements a publisher would have in mind if he judges your pitch and your game idea. Because of course there are other aspects as well. He won't sign a deal with you if he does not believe in you as a team and that you're capable to really develop the game. But when it comes to the game idea itself, the game, the fun in the game, here are some rules or some things a publisher will take a close look whether your game idea has it or not. The first thing is, does the game have the coolness factor? Is the game cool? Is there anything where you say, wow, this rocks? Obviously, this can be achieved by what we call production value. So if you're doing something like Crysis, of course it's your 3D engine, you know, the special effects, the graphic itself, so that's a very obvious thing. It's a very easy thing in terms of you can just buy it, but it's a very expensive thing. So if you want to achieve this coolness factor by really state-of-the-art graphics, if you have the money, you might be able to do it. You can hire a good graphics studio like Virgin, so just kidding. But there are other ways to have this coolness factor. So coolness factor is not only about production values. I mean, something like Angry Birds, nobody would say this is the best graphic I've ever seen in my life, but it also has this coolness factor. It has something special, something unique, something when you play it or when you see it or hear about the idea, you instantly say, that is cool. Oh, I want to play that. Wow, why has nobody ever thought about something like that? So even with a small budget, if you have a cool idea, if you have something that makes this game special, unique, and it gives this game this coolness factor, this kind of special spark of magic, that's important. If you don't have that, if you have anything else, but everybody looks at your game and says, there is something missing, then this something is the coolness factor. It misses the coolness factor, the thing where people say, wow, I want to play that. Next thing is, I'm sorry, actually my slides I just see are in German, but I translate. So, does the game offer a unique gaming experience? Goes along, of course, with the coolness factor. But the coolness factor, you could say, is the thing if if somebody at school tells his friend about the game, then the first time he tells a friend about this game, then it's because of the coolness factor. If he tells him about the game again and again and again, and even in months and 2 months ahead, then it's because of the special, unique gaming experience. Because the coolness factor is whether people will start playing your game. But if then there is no unique gaming experience, of the game is just lame and boring, then people will, quit instantly. And so you also need to give the player a very special, unique gameplay experience. And once again, I'm not talking about, it has to be innovative and something nobody has ever done before. If you take, for example, the Blizzard games, they are not really quite innovators. What they do is, they take things that are cool out of other games and polish it to a level that is absolutely amazing and incredible. And this is their experience or their unique gaming experience they offer the player. If a player buys a Blizzard game, he knows this game is polished up to the end and I really get something very smooth that gets me into the game and it hooks me for maybe years. The next thing is, does the game offer a special social component? And now we're all thinking, oh yeah, Facebook or something like that. It's not necessarily Facebook. It doesn't even have to be a multiplayer game. Of course, with a multiplayer game, it's easier. I mean, if you have something like FIFA and you play with your friends, you instantly know what I mean with a social component. So it's like you talk about the game with your friends and you go all getting involved into that. So multiplayer, yes, of course, it's easy, but even with a single-player game, if you take something like, for example, Pokemon, you can achieve the special social component that the people will tell their friends about it and will try to get a game experience together with their friends, even if it's a single-player game. So whatever you can achieve, even if you do a single-player game, to get other people involved, to share this kind of gameplay feeling, the better. The next thing, and this is a really important thing, and this is something where developers tend to say, yeah, but we do something so great and innovative, and it has so many things in it. But for a publisher, I mean, in the end, it's you, and this is also you, as if you're on the development side, also in the end really want the publisher to achieve is that he sells, of course, a lot of copies. Because, I mean, we all do that because it's the greatest place to be in the games industry, and we all want to have fun, but we also need some money to live at least and pay our rents, so we also need to earn some money. And a very important factor for a publisher to market your game, to bring your game to the market and bring it to a broad audience and get as many players as possible, one aspect is that the basic game idea is easy to communicate. This is, I think, Project Gotham. They have a nice claim, which is, it's not how fast you drive, it's how you drive fast. Very simple message, perfect. Really nails down the game concept of Project Gotham. Of course, for a racing game it's easier, but no matter what kind of game you have, if it's really complicated to already explain to your friend what kind of game you're doing and why it's so great, you should think again, because I mean, if you can already not explain it in some simple words to your friends, how shall the publisher, explain it to the market what your game is all about? And there are a lot of cool games out there that really failed just because for that reason. Because they were cool, innovative, and even got high ratings, but nobody bought the game because everybody was like, yeah, I've read about it, and Gamma Sutra, they all gave it 10 out of 10, but I don't understand what this game is really about. So people are a bit like, nah, maybe I just buy the next FIFA or whatever. So your game idea must be something that can be communicated very easily. So don't be proud of something that is so complex nobody understands when you explain it to them. That's not a good thing. Next thing that goes along with that as well is, does the game is based on something the market knows? Which, I mean, obviously if you have a famous brand like, Lord of the Rings, then it's easy again, but it doesn't necessarily need to be based on something, on a movie license or something like that. I'll give you one example. I was working, like I said before, on the game Spellforce. I don't know if you know this game. And it's pretty much a mixture of a strategy and of an RPG game. That was already one of the first big obstacles because nobody ever tried it the way we did before. So we already knew we had a high risk here to communicate what Spellforce is really all about in terms of the gameplay mechanics. So what we did then is we said, okay, then at least with the races we have in the game, let's stick to the cliche. The dwarves are really in the mines, they are really with heavy weapons. The elves live in the forest, they are really, the ranger kind of guys. We could have gone wide there as well, give, I don't know, the elves some fancy sci-fi weapons or whatever, but with that we would have even raised the bar for the players to get into the game. So if you have some risks in your game where you say, oh, this is something that might be hard to communicate or hard to understand for the players, then at least go for all the other aspects of the game. Stick to the cliche. I'm not saying with all your games stick to the cliche and just make another clone. That's also a bad idea. But always think about, okay, is it easy to transport to the player or to make the transfer for the player what I've meant with that kind of feature or whatever? Or is it easy to understand? A good example is why a at least in my personal opinion, for example, historical games or medieval games, especially in Europe and Germany, are so popular compared, for example, the only few exceptions in the sci-fi genre is when I play something like Age of Empires. I know exactly what a swordsman is good for, how a ranger reacts, what the cavalry does. When I have the super mega plasma gun instead of the hyper laser wiper gun, I'm like, which one is better? I can't really, I must read the manual or whatever, or must think how the game designer thought about that. So it's way harder to get into that. Even a game like Mass Effect, for that reason, all the weapons are based on, projectile weapons like shotguns and stuff like that. So they didn't go too wild with their weapons to give the player some things they already know about, some common ground. Because otherwise, if everything is in your game is brand new and fancy, players will go like, yeah, that looks nice, but I'm a little afraid to try it. Is your market big enough? That's also a question you probably, as a developer, would not ask yourself, at least not in the beginning, because first of all, it's got to have a great idea and I want to make a great game. But again, in the end, you probably need a publisher to finance your idea, to bring it, to market, and the publisher will definitely ask this question because he needs to make money, and again, you should also try to make money. So again, there are a couple of really great games, like we have Ico here, that receive critically acclaimed, press awards and what have you, but never really made it to a mass market because the market was not big enough for that game. So always ask yourself, is the market big enough? Does not necessarily mean, okay, the biggest market right now is, first-person shooter, I do another first-person shooter. The biggest market in that, or the big market can also mean I go to a niche market, but there are not that many players in that niche market that makes the best game for that niche market. For example, like Dedalic did when everybody's in the past said, okay, the adventure genre is dead, and suddenly they thought, nobody's doing adventure games anymore, let's try that. And suddenly they had their niche and the market was big enough for their niche and they're making good money. So I'm not saying, go for the biggest market, but for whatever market you go, make sure it's big enough that you can make a success there.